Magandang umaga, magandang tanghali, magandang hapon, magandang gabi. A very pleasant day to everyone. Welcome to your hour, and this is Rita Gadi. We have approximately or exactly 18 days to go when the national elections will be held. And here we are going to elect a new president, a vice president, 12 members of the Senate, representatives in the House of, in the lower chamber, governors of 81 provinces, 1,500 municipal and city mayors, including their provincial, city, and municipal boards. Ang dami. So you can just imagine how lengthy the text of your ballot would be when you have all of these names printed. But nonetheless, you have the numbers also corresponding to the names of the candidates, and then you have that blank circle which should be shaded. Those who have been voting the past several elections, sanay na kayo dyan. You have to shade that round zero, and then you have to know the number. So most of us, or most of those voting, so that you can remember the numbers of your senators, your members of the council, your senators and all of that, kailangan meron kayong kodigo. That's important. Well, at my late age, I look back to what? To 56 years ago. That was the first national elections where I participated in, not as a voter. I wasn't even voting yet at the time because the voting age was reduced by President Marcos from 21 to 18. So in 1965, hindi pa bumoboto yung mga 18-year-olds. So that was a time where, as I said, I participated in the campaigns of the national elections for the presidency. So when I look back in time, that's how long ago? 56 years ago. Haba, ano? So you could see how I must be a little close to 100 already by this time. But nonetheless, what I'm trying to say is, historically, we would say that elections seemed to be simpler at the time because there were only two national political parties in 1965. You had the Nacionalista Party and the Liberal Party. So either which way, you inherited from your grandparents, your parents, all the way down to you, exactly the color of your political party. Kaya marami dyan na talagang from the time they were born and the time they could vote, kung ano man yung partido ng kanilang mga magulang at mga lolo-lola, yun na rin ang kanilang dala. But in time, we have seen the progression of so many political parties. We will not go through the timeline of this, but I was trying to emphasize how you just had to choose at the time in 1965 between the Nacionalista and the Liberal Party candidates. And they had a political platform. In other words, these political parties really had a program of government. They had, whoever was in the administration, they had a counter government proposal that they will present to the people. That was, as I said, how simple it was, but still it was profound in the sense that you had to come up, or the political parties had to come up with a new program of government so that the people would see the difference. So there could be continuity if there will be re-election, or it will just be a change of a government or a change of administration, as the case may be. But the title of our program this afternoon is A Multitude Arising. So here we are looking at the phenomenon, because I call it a phenomenon from my timeline and from my point of view, from the platform where I'm standing now, close to, I'm close to 80 years old already. Mag-80 na nga. So you can imagine how it was 56 years ago. I have not seen a multitude that has gone together with a candidate for the presidency moving in the streets, mga nakamotorsiklo, yung mga tao nasa bangketa, yung mga naglalakad. And this is separate from the crowd that's actually where the rally is going to be held. That's why I call it a multitude arising. As far as I am concerned, I don't know for others who may have lived through all of this. I personally have yet to see a crowd as large as what is happening now. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the candidacy of Ferdinand Marcos II, or BBM as he is called, the junior of Ferdinand Edralin Marcos. This is where I have seen that his motorcade moving in the streets, in the roads, in the highways. You already have the crowd of people, the multitude already on both sides of his motorcade, crowding him until they get to the venue where the rally is going to be held. If not that, then you could see the rally itself, kung gaano kadami sila. And, sometimes they criticize this by saying, daya na yan and all of that. That is why there was one occasion, one of the master of ceremonies at one of the rallies announced to the crowd, sindihan ninyo, you light your cell phones para makita yung tao. And then you could see that the lights of the cell phones really as far as the eye could see. Kaya doon mo makikita, this is what I'm trying to say. There is a multitude that is arising. And from where I'm standing in this particular period of our contemporary history, I have yet to see a multitude as huge as this that I see now. So this is what is happening now with the candidacy of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. You also have the rallies of other candidates, but then you could see their crowd amassing where the venue of where the stage, you have the stage where the candidates are positioned and where they're going to speak. But the accompaniment of the multitude, it's very rare that you could see them really moving around with the motorcade of the candidate itself. That is why I have to give notice to this. You call it a multitude arising precisely because, this for me is something that I have not seen. So can you imagine that for the past, how many national elections from 1965, I have witnessed several other rallies and several other, many of the things that are happening as far as elections are concerned. But as I said, a multitude arising is the first time I'm seeing it here with the candidacy of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. or Ferdinand Marcos II or BBM and his running mate for vice presidency, Mayor Sara Duterte. So there you could see how important it is for all of these events to be recorded, precisely because I personally have not seen anything like it, and how it is that we can probably try to decipher where this multitude is coming from, considering the fact that it has been 56 years since his father was elected into office, since Ferdinand Edralin Marcos was elected into office, and it has been 36 years since President Marcos has left the office in Malacanang, the presidency, and so you've had several other presidents after him. And again, I would have to repeat, have we seen this multitude accompanying other presidential elections after 1986? So here we have the caravans, you have the motorbikes, you have the other, the caravans, of course, are different vehicles that are joining the motorcade. And then you have the people on the side street and the sidewalk who have gathered also there to greet to cheer the motorcade itself, and they will be moving on to the venue. But this, as I've said, is a multitude that is moving together with the motorcade of the candidate himself and of course herself, that is the president and the vice president candidates for this coming national elections. That's BBM and that's Inday Sara, and that is how their names are being shouted out whenever there is this big rally that they have. The latest we saw was the one in Cebu, na talagang napakaraming tao. But you know how it was, well, here I am again, going back in time, when, as I've said, the last of the two-party system that I witnessed was during the elections of President Marcos and the incumbent President Macapagal. He was Senate President at the time. So there you had only two political parties, although sometime, during that period, you also had the party of Raul Manglapus. I think it was the Progressive Party of the Philippines, or PPP. They also had that. But the contending political parties then was the Nacionalista and the Liberal Party. And just for the sake of historical data, just so long as those of you who may belong to my generation, I don't know kung meron pa talagang who can still remember as far back. I had a diary of that election in 1965, and I even have a map of the Philippines. I don't know if I could show it here. Maybe hindi nga makikita. Anyway, I have a map, and then there is a pentel pen that moves from the north all the way to the south, passing through several islands in the Visayas. But then I had names written. Yung handwriting ko maliit pa noon, kaya nagkasya naman dito sa mapa ko. And for every province na pinuntahan namin, nakasulat yung mga political leaders. You must remember at the time, President Marcos, as Senate President, has a Liberal Party siya. He moved into the Nacionalista Party for the National Convention. And so he was the candidate of the Nacionalista Party, while the incumbent president, President Macapagal, was the candidate for the Liberal Party. But despite the fact that Senate President Marcos already moved into the Nacionalista Party, there were a lot of Liberal Party leaders in the provinces that still supported him. He was the outstanding congressman and senator of his time. And so he has also been, a lot of people have been beholden to him insofar as his leadership is concerned. So marami pa rin na mga miyembro ng dating partido niya that remained loyal to him. So even as he ran in a different party from his party mates in the Liberal Party, they still supported him. And that is why, let me just run to the names. This is for the sake of those of my time. Yung mga nakikinig sa akin ngayon na marahil ay halos kasing edad ko o baka bata-bata ng konti, pero baka sakaling maalala pa nito. Mahalaga ito sapagkat sa ngayon, I do not have anymore the names of governors and politicians of all these provinces. Although, if I mention to you the names at the time, makikilala pa ninyo na marahil itong mga anak na nila o mga apo nila. So let's begin from Batanes. Oh my goodness, you had Pablo Bataan there, all the way in the north. You had Pablo Roman, and then in Batanes you had the Abad. This is from the ancestry of Abad. You know him as the budget secretary during the time of Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, and the Abad family from there. And then you had all the way north, you had Jose Carrion in Nueva Vizcaya, and of course in the Ilocos provinces you had Floro Crisologo. And then, of course, in Ilocos Norte, you had Ferdinand Marcos and the family of Manong Roque Ablan. It was still Roque Ablan Sr. and then Manong Roque, Roquito, as they would call him. Sila yung nasa Ilocos Norte. These are the big names then at the time. And then you had, I already mentioned to you, Floro Crisologo, and then Pangasinan. You had Consuelo Perez, and then, of course, Speaker Perez at the time. Consuelo Perez took over when Speaker Perez died. And then you have their Congress, of course, Conrado Estrella from Pangasinan, and those were the big names then. And then you had also Eugenio. You had Primicias, the old Cipriano Primicias, the father of the eventually became the governor, Manong Tito Primicias of Pangasinan, but originally it was his father, Cipriano Primicias. These are the old names then. And Isabela, you already had the D family, Faustino D, and the Albano family. So this could be familiar to many of this generation mga apo na siguro ito ng uh, mga D at saka yung mga Albano dun sa Isabela. And then you had Quintin Paredes from Abra, and then Aguido Agbayani also there in Pangasinan. At the time, he was the mayor of Santa Barbara, pero malaking pangalan na rin yan dyan sa Pangasinan. Then you had Carag in Cagayan, the family of the Carags. One of our good friends, Maribel Carag, is from that family, and then that's a big political family that you have there in Cagayan. And then you had here we're moving on now to the Nepomucenos and Rafael Lasatin, and then the De Leons in Pampanga. So the names could be familiar to many of you. And then in Nueva Ecija, you had Hoson, and then Concepcion, and then you had Juan Liwag. In Laguna, you had Wenceslas Lagumbay. And then we have in Pampanga, you had the Puyat. In Manila, you had already Arturo Tolentino at the time. Ang haba rin ang buhay nitong naging vice president ni President Marcos. And then you had Gil Puyat also from Pampanga. And then you had in Rizal, you had Eulogio Rodriguez, the grand old man of the Nacionalista Party, the president of the Nacionalista Party, as a matter of fact. I already mentioned Juan Liwag, the Hosons in Nueva Ecija, and then in Laguna, you had Wenceslas Lagumbay. We had Narsing Santiago and Alejo Santos in Bulacan, and then Justiniano and Bocalan and Montano in, remember the Jabida incident there, and then that was already in Cavite, and then Remulla, and then also the Camarinos in Cavite, the Laurels and the Leviste in Batangas, and then of course Jose Roy, Senator Roy at the time, and then Marinduque, Licaros. These are familiar names even up to now. We have Espinosa, for instance. Yes, and then in the Visayas area, in the Bicol area, Jose Alberto in Catanduanes, and then the Fuentabellas in Camarines, and then you had the Triviños, Juan Triviño and Johnny Triviño in Albay, and the Escudero already, even at the time. So you have these names, even then, the political leaders in 1965. We had the Espinosas, and then both of them brothers, Moises and Emilio. I can hardly read my handwriting, but just so long as I mentioned this name, so you could have a name recall of these people. In Negros, you had the Velosos. And then, of course, in the Visayas area, in Samar, you had Trevino. In Albay, I already mentioned Escudero. And then in Leyte and Samar, Rosales, Veloso, Fernando, sino ba ito? Fernando Marcelino, if that's the name. And then Jose Avelino. Remember that phrase, what are we in power for? Well, that's from Jose Avelino there in the Visayas area. Negros Oriental, you have Veloso, and then in Bohol, Kabangbang. Negros Occidental, you had Alfredo Montelibano, and then of course the brothers Eugenio and Fernando Lopez, Jerry Rojas in Capiz, again Montelibano Jr. also there in the Visayas area, Ramon Mitra, Abueg Reyes, also names, name recall from Palawan. In Cebu, you had the Duranos, also in the Visayas, the Gustillo. But in Cebu, you had Mariano Cuenca, the Gullias, and then Durano. Many of their children and grandchildren are now also in politics. And then in Surigao, we have, this is Constantino Navarro. And then, of course, Jotina there, sa May Cavite na yan. Dio Plaza. Already, we still have the plazas there in power up to this day. In Iloilo, you had Rodolfo Ganson, and then you had Fermin Caram. Remember, there was the Philippines Orient Airways at the time. They had also, in addition to Philippine Airlines, meron din si Fermin Caram. And at one time, he was also supporting President Marcos by the use of this plane. And then in the Lanaus, you had Ali Di Mapuro, you had Rashid Lukman, you had Rashid and Tarhata, husband and wife Lukman, and then Dumacao Alonto. We also have in Cagayan de Oro, that area where my partner Bono Adaza is from, you had Emmanuel Palaez and Oloy Roa. And then of course, Poblete and the Buenos, and sino ba ito? Comendador, and well, they also had the plane, Queen Air. I'm writing even the aircraft that they, or the airplane that they own, kasi mga nasakyan din namin to at the time in 1965. The Poblete, Bueno, in Zamboanga City, Cesar Climaco. And then of course in the Cotabatos, you had Salipada Pendatun, Udtug Matalam, Sinsuat, the Ampatuans, and of course the Gadis there in North Cotabato. You had the Kenya and James Chongbian, also in South Cotabato, and Alfredo, you had Almendras also from Davao City, and then all the way down you had the mayor of Davao City. Eventually, you had Mayor Santos and Mayor Lopez, and of course, also Sergio Morales. And yeah, these are the names. I am mentioning them because, as I've said, this is 56 years ago. Those are the big names of the political leaders that the 1965 presidential campaign undertook, and that was what I covered at the time. So, but then again, going back to our multitude arising, wala yang multitude na yan. Merong mga tao sa rally na wherever the event was going to be held, and that was sponsored by either the governor or the mayor of the place. Tapos doon mo na makikita yung multitude, yung crowd. Pero wala talaga yung ganito kalaki na nakikita natin ngayon. Now, why am I speaking in this manner as though this is really something new? It is, as far as I'm concerned. Perhaps you may have witnessed other crowds, etc. But for me, as far as this presidential campaign is concerned, and for the son of Ferdinand Marcos, this is really something that I consider a phenomenon. A multitude arising. Why is it a phenomenon? Because from 1986 up to today, present, the past administrations have done nothing except to vilify, to attack, to insult, to rage their anger against the Marcoses, against the Marcos family, especially against Ferdinand Edralin Marcos and Imelda Romualdez Marcos. So for me, it is a phenomenon that despite the fact that 36 years have passed, you have this multitude arising in support of this young man, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., BBM as you would call him, at this stage, when his father first became president 56 years ago. And that 36 years ago in 1986, in the 4 historic days of February, there was nothing except the insult and the anger and the vilification that was undertaken by the opposition against the Marcoses. And that is why they were called the yellow people. Yan. And now you have at this stage, 36 years thereafter, the same yellow people, but with a different color now, the shades of pink, fuchsia, or whatever other color they have that is related to pink. And they're the same group that are the inheritors, the heirs, ang sama ng aking English. They are the heirs of the 1986 group that hated and vilified the Marcoses. Hindi lang talaga ordinary hatred in words. They had many things that were done. I've already enumerated this in several of my other episodes. In fact, the very first thing they did, Corazon Aquino, the number one yellow of that particular political party, signed the first law, which we know as Executive Order Number 1, the law that created the PCGG, the Presidential Commission on Good Government, which already declared in that particular executive order that the Marcoses amassed the wealth of the Filipino people. Doon pa lang sinasabi na nagnakaw na si Marcos ng pera ng taong bayan. Can you imagine? That was 1986. And that was the first case that they filed against the Marcoses. They did not file the case here in the Philippines. They filed it in America. But since hindi naman magamit ng Amerika yung nagnakaw sa taong bayan directly, so they had to use an American law, which is known as the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organization Law, which means that the organization or the government of President Marcos was a racketeering corrupt organization. Hindi man lang gobyerno, organization daw ni Marcos, yung gobyerno niya. At yung perang kinuha niya ay galing sa taong bayan. So that was the first criminal case that they filed against the Marcoses. So you can imagine how it was. 86, 87, mainit na mainit pa yung lahat ng pagbabatikos nila sa mga Marcos. 36 years ago. And now the son is running for the presidency, the same position as his father. But look at the people that are supporting him. Kaya sinasabi ko nga, multitude. Even I could not identify anymore kung saan nanggaling yung mga tao na yan. Maybe if we go by province, that is why I mentioned these names of 1965, baka sakaling mga anak na nila, mga apo na nila ito. Because if you look at the multitude that is supporting the rallies and the caravans and the parades and the venue where Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is attending together with Inday Sara, these are young people. Karamihan siguro sila, well, what is the age of our youth? 18 to 44, yan ba yung mga kabataan ngayon? But you must remember, kahit na 44 years old sila, Marcos left Malacanang 36 years ago. So ilang taon lang sila? 8 years old lang sila. How would they know? Were they reading newspapers already? Para bang sasabihin natin na merong time gap from the supporters of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. now and the supporters of President Marcos in 1965 and up to 1986. 36 years din. Kaya pag titingnan natin, ang dami ng mga presidential elections na dumaan, we did not have this multitude arising. But it's not an ordinary, and that's why sabi nga it's a phenomenon, because all the past 36 years, the newspaper, the media, wherever else you can read or watch or see anything, lahat yan, batikos lahat against Ferdinand Marcos and Imelda Marcos. In spite of the fact, ito na nga ang talagang malungkot dito, kinasuhan na nga yan sila. One of the most vicious cases that they could file against Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos in LA, yung RICO case, and then in New York City. Sa LA, na-dismiss na ng mismong Justice Department ng courts ng Amerika, dinismiss na yung case against the Marcoses. In fact, nagpetition pa ang mga abogado, American lawyers ng administration na Mrs. Aquino. They raised their petition all the way to the Court of Appeals, of Los Angeles, because the case was earlier dismissed already, yung kanilang RICO case doon. So nag-appeal sila hanggang sa Court of Appeals. And even then, in the Court of Appeals, they lost the case. First, sabi nga nila, ang sinubmit nila na evidences are newspaper reports. And ang nag-testify that those are newspaper reports is a certain Mr. Fernando authenticating the newspaper reports. Kaya sabi nga ng court, hindi pwede ito. We need evidence kasi criminal case yan eh. And second, they did not supply any other evidence other than newspaper reports. So that case was dismissed. Then there was another case that they filed, New York City. Doon medyo mabigat talaga because there were 4 buildings, real estate properties that were bought during the incumbency of President Marcos. And the accusation was the money that was used to buy those 4 buildings was money that Marcos and Imelda stole from the Filipino people. Kaya doon pumapasok yung sinasabi nilang racketeering influence and corrupt organization. So ganun ka-corrupt yung administration ni Marcos na ninakaw niya yung pera ng taong bayan, which according to Mrs. Aquino's law, nakasulat na nga doon. So that was the trial I've talked about endlessly and repeatedly. But in spite of the fact that I've talked about it, and these are already public records and anybody can read it, paulit-ulit pa rin for the past 36 years, binibintang pa rin na si Marcos nagnakaw ng pera ng taong bayan. Oh my goodness, that is why I always say, I challenge anyone. Again, I repeat. One document, one witness, isa lang, that could evidently show that there was money transferred by Marcos from the national treasury or the national budget to his pocket na ginamit niya to buy those buildings. Kasi sa New York trial, they had the United States government, the Swiss government, and the Philippine government. 3 governments, nagtulong-tulong sila, naghalungkat ng mga dokumento, naghalungkat ng kung saan man sila makakakita ng whatever record could be availed of, until they gathered something like 350,000 pages of documents and presented that as evidences in court for that particular case against the Marcoses. Nagnakaw sa taong bayan. They got 95 witnesses. And these are not ordinary people. These are bank managers, bank finance officers, tellers, cashiers, friends of, supposedly friends of President Marcos, and people supposedly in the know as far as Swiss accounts are concerned. May mga FBI agents na nag-testify na alam nila ang paper trail ng nangyari na nanggaling yung pera from Switzerland na pumunta ng New York City na bumili ng mga buildings na yon, ng real estate na yon. So you can imagine 4 months of trial, 4.5 to be more exact, of a trial on a daily basis, 9 o'clock until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, pag minsan umaabot pa ng 5 o'clock. And hardly any vacation except pagka merong holiday ang Amerika, or pagka meron silang, when the judge would be declaring na, okay, we will meet a day after, it's the judge who actually declares, but that is very seldom actually. So you can imagine 4.5 months of trial, 95 witnesses, 350,000 documents, lahat na yan. And the verdict of a 12-man jury, hindi lang 12, huh? There were 18. 12 was the regular jury, and then they added 6 more because just in case may magkasakit na regular jury o merong isa na mag-quit, meron talagang pwedeng mag-substitute immediately para hindi madidelay yung trial. So you see how sigurista sila na talagang matutuloy ang trial na yan. So they had 18 members in the jury box listening every day to 95 witnesses and also looking over those different documents that they were presenting. I already described how it was brought in court. Ordinarily, you had a lawyer carrying an attaché case with all the documents, but this time, because of the Imelda trial, they had a grocery cart. Yung ginagamit natin pagka nag-grocery. Ganong kalaki yung lalagyan ng mga dokumento na pinapasok nila sa courtroom. Okay, so that was how it was. And at the end of the trial, Imelda's lawyer, or Imelda for that matter, did not have to present any witness at all, or any document in her defense. Wala siyang pinresent ng kanyang witness or kanyang document in defense. Instead, ginamit ng kanyang mga abogado, ni Jerry Spence, one of the best criminal lawyers of America, he used the documents of the Justice Department American prosecutors as the defense of Imelda Marcos. Kasi doon nakita na meron ngang pera na pumasok sa American banks na yung pera na yon ay binayad dun sa 4 prime real estate properties. At yung pera na yon ay nanggaling sa mga bangko ng Switzerland. So they had this paper trail. In fact, they had a 6 by 12 ang tawag nito anong tawag to, yung kanilang malaking parang divider na nilagay sa harapan ng court, 6 feet by 12 feet na natitiklop-tiklop na nilatag nila para makita yung flow of money. It's a flow chart that huge. Kaya even the judge said, do not let the size intimidate you. It is just that the FBI agents want everybody to see how it was. So there you have it. May mga box yun na naka-drawing from the Swiss accounts, andun yung number ng Swiss accounts, andun yung pangalan ng Swiss bank, kung saan pumunta, palipat-lipat yung mga accounts na yon sa mga bangko sa Amerika, una sa LA hanggang sa nakaabot sa New York, hanggang sa pumasok na ito sa mga payment doon sa 4 real estate properties. Ginamit yan as the defense of Ferdinand Imelda Marcos because the question there was, saan nanggaling yung pera na pumasok sa Swiss accounts, dun sa Swiss banks? Where did the money come from? Because that is where you can determine if Marcos stole the money of the Filipino people, the money in the Swiss banks that went to buy those real estate properties. Where did it come from? No document. No witness could testify. Walang may alam. Walang pinisinta ni isang pirasong papel. That's exactly what the judge said towards the end of the trial. I've almost memorized what he said. When you come to this courtroom and you accuse the widow of the friend of 5 American presidents, and then when you remove all the fancy ornaments from the tree, you come to my court and you tell me, gee, we can't find the documents. That's the statement of the judge himself, Judge John F. Keenan. It may not be the exact sentence, but that's exactly what he said. And I'm quoting this as a direct quote. Gee, you can't find the documents. What documents was he asking for? The document that would show that there was money stolen from the Filipino people. Ang dami-daming ang kwento, ang dami-daming witness, ang dami-daming papel na pinakita. Kaya sinabi nga ng judge, when you remove the fancy ornaments from the tree, it all boils down to that. Where are the documents? And then you come to this court and you say, gee, meron pa nga siyang sinabing, gee, we can't find the documents. Wala. Walang mahanap na dokumento. And that is why unanimous ang acquittal of Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos there. Meaning, wala silang nakita o na-present na evidence na nagnakaw sa taong bayan. And yet, for the past 36 years, almost on a daily basis, and now especially, you have the accusation being thrown now at Ferdinand Marcos Jr. at BBM. Anong mga sinasabi? Wag iboto yung nagnakaw, ibalik yung ninakaw. What are they talking about? It is as though 36 years did not pass in front of them. As though there was no trial at all of a criminal case involving precisely stolen money from the Filipino people. Ano ba yan? I get almost hysterical when I talk about this. But that's exactly it. And then you had the PCGG, which was headed by Jovito Salonga in the early years. And then you had Jovito Salonga signing compromise agreements with so-called cronies. Ano bang definition ng crony? A crony is just an associate. Hindi business partner yan. An associate or a friend or a close friend, yan ang crony. But they were not just, they had their own businesses and they had nothing to do with the Swiss accounts or the money of the Filipino people. Or else, Bakit hindi sila tinawag na mag-witness? All of those that signed a compromise agreement with Salonga. Si Salonga lang ang chairman at the time. And these are the big names that you know now, Lucio Tan, J.Y. Campos, Cojuangco, Florendo, etc. and all. Maybe I am missing some names, pero lahat sila that are being accused as cronies. Nagkaroon sila ng compromise agreement. Bakit hindi sila pinatawag sa korte at doon nagsalita? Oh, ito yung ninakaw ni Marcos, binigay sa amin para bumili nito, para mag-invest dito, para yung ganito. You know? Wala. Because wala talaga. And yet, for the past 36 years, that's all they've been saying. And now that the son of Ferdinand Marcos is running for the office of the presidency, they're attacking him again with the same accusation as what Cory Aquino did in 1986. Kaya nakita ninyo, kung namanan itong mga politikong ito ngayon, kasalukuyan, itong mga pangalan na binasa ko ngayon, ay ang mga kandidato ngayon na lumalaban dito kay Ferdinand Marcos Jr., abay, namana din nila kung ano yung sinimulan doon ni Corazon Aquino. Plain and simple logic, isn't it? I am not even defending Marcos. I am merely reciting the events that have come to fore. I have nothing to do with the trial in New York except that I was there, that I was in the office of Jerry Spence, his lawyer, that we worked together on the different evidences that were presented, that we listened to the witnesses that were there. So I heard, I saw, I read, and there was not a single person, nor a single document, man lang, na nagsasabi na kumuha ng pera si Marcos sa pera ng taong bayan. In fact, one of the justices of the Court of Appeals in LA, he has a Russian name. I don't know if I have to mention that. Anyway, anong sinabi niya? If President Marcos at gunpoint went to the Central Bank of the Philippines or to the National Treasury and got the money of the people, and then he kept that money under his mattress, and then one day he took that money, went to New York, and bought 4 real estate properties. Then you have the fraud. Then you have the criminal act of stealing from the Filipino people. Kung ganon ang nangyari. Pero walang ganon. Not a single evidence. Dyaryo ang pinresenta ng Philippine government, ng Justice Department. The most, I don't know how you would describe the justice system of America. It's supposed to be one of the strictest justice system that you have. So yung kanilang mga prosecutors, yun ang pinresenta because yun lang ang ebidensya binigay ng Philippine government at the time. In fact, even during the trial in New York, the Solicitor General, Frank Chavez, was attending every once in a while. I even talked to him. I wanted to interview him, but I talked to him. I said, well, Solicitor General, why don't you take the witness stand? Because you've been making all kinds of public statements and press releases that the Marcoses stole the money of the Filipino people. You say it out publicly. Why don't you take the stand and under oath so that it becomes really testimony historically that they stole from the Filipino people? Where was Salonga? Why did he not testify? Where was Ordonez, Secretary of Justice? Where are all of these people at the time? And then up to now, the lawyers now that are also accusing the Marcoses of having stolen from the Filipino people, where were they then? Buhay pa naman sila noon 1992 pa lang yan At saka patay na si Marcos. Huwag na kayong matakot na buhay pa siya. Patay na nga si Marcos at the time. Marcos died in 1989. So why am I bringing all of this back? Precisely because, as I've said, here we have this multitude arising, supporting the candidacy of the son of Ferdinand Marcos, who was accused in 1986 of stealing the money of the Filipino people, who was accused of violations of human rights when he was never accused criminally, either in his own country here in the Philippines or in any place in America. of having violated human rights. A human rights violation is a criminal case. And under our law, American law, international law, you have to be tried in your country of origin. So ayaw nila yun. They violated the first basic right of Ferdinand Marcos by not allowing him to return to the Philippines to defend himself against the accusation that he violated human rights of 10,000 people. A class suit. Ano ba yan? Ibig sabihin, 10,000 ang pinatay niyang sabay-sabay o 10,000 nilunod niya. May mga nabalian ng kamay, may mga nabuhay, may mga na-fracture, ganyan. O kaya sinagasaan niya ng road roller. Yun ang class suit. Isang one act. And that was defined to me by Mr. Mark Lane. Yan, buhay pa yan. One of the leading civil rights lawyers in New York. I talked to him several times, long distance, on this human rights case na sinasabi niyang class suit of 10,000. Sabi niya, hindi pwedeng mangyari yan. And if you look at the case in Honolulu, 4 lang yan na nag-file ng kaso laban kay Marcos, and it is not a criminal case. It is a civil case asking payment for damages which they did not have to prove in court. Anong klase yan? In fact, that was dismissed already in the lower court in Hawaii. Sinabi ng Judge Fong doon, first, it has to be tried in the country of origin. Second, it is a claim for damages, the damages of which have not been proven. In other words, meron bang medical certificate na pinakita? May doktor ba na nag-witness doon? In fact, one of them that was claiming is even Jose Maria Sison. Excuse me. Excuse me. Kasama sa order of battle ng paglaban ng ating pamahalaan sa mga komunistang rebelde sa bundok. Yan, si Jose Maria Sison. He was one of the claimants also. Claimants for damages. Tandaan ninyo yan. You don't have to be a lawyer even to go through the nitty-gritty of that case. You only have to read it. It's a civil complaint, not a criminal case. So, hanggang ngayon, yan din ang sinasabi at binibintang sa anak. Sa anak na how young was he when his father became president? He was 8 years old. And for 21 years, lived in Malacanang without being aware of the fabrication that was going to be done against his father in 1986 in Honolulu already. So yan, martial law, torture, at yung tinatawag nga na nakaw na kayamanan. And then they come up with all kinds of figures, how many billions of dollars and pesos he would have. But they don't even have the exact amount. As a matter of fact, the FBI and the Justice Department of the United States of America wrote the Swiss government and asked the Swiss government, magkano ba talagang pera ni Marcos dyan? Wala nga silang masagot. Because the man who had all of this done in Switzerland or the other banks died in 1989, and he wanted to defend himself precisely. So here we have today a multitude arising who were not yet born in 1965 with all these names I was mentioning, who perhaps were born sometime between 1986 and today, and yet are part of this multitude arising in spite of the fact that over all these years, they have been attacking, vilifying, accusing Ferdinand Marcos, Edralin Marcos, the president, with all of these accusations and throwing it now at the sun. Of course, the tax cases is a different matter altogether because here they have billions naman of pesos that have to be paid in taxes when even the BIR and even the court do not know exactly how big the real estate properties are, how much money there actually is, that will be inherited pa by the family of Ferdinand Marcos. So paano ka magsasabi na 23 billion, 203 billion, hindi pa nga ma-determine talaga kung gaano kalaki o gaano kadami o kung meron pa bang natitira. Because remember, the first order or the first law of Corazon Aquino was to sequester lahat. And what did they do? They sequestered, they sold, and some of them even stole. All of that. So we have a multitude arising following the candidacy of Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos II and Inday Sara Duterte of Davao City for the offices of the President and Vice President 18 days from today. Now, can all of this multitude in this crowds and rallies, etc., be converted into votes? Well, ang dami-dami na ngang survey. You have all sorts of surveys. You have surveys of 1,200 people, 1,500 people. You have surveys of the crowd itself. You have all kinds of research, not just surveys. Ang tawag nila research surveys. At they come up with all those figures. 60% na ang percentage ng multitude arising for Ferdinand Marcos and Sara Duterte. And then you have the next contender with less than half even of that percentage. Now, will that be converted into votes 18 days from now? You have the answer. Right now, what I'm talking about is you have a multitude arising, a phenomenon that is coming out now in support of Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos II. And as I said, a phenomenon because these are not just ordinary loyalists. Perhaps they didn't even know about the details of the administration of Ferdinand Marcos. So what is it? Is it in the air? Something they have heard from their parents? Where is it coming from? Where is their belief in BBM and Sara Duterte coming from? With Sara Duterte, you have the President Duterte still incumbent. But with BBM, you have his father 36 years ago. And 56 years passed since he was elected president. There is a God. There are phenomena. There are miracles that can happen. I cannot predict. I cannot make a statement. I can only go back to the title of our program. There is a multitude arising. A multitude arising from all the accusations that they have thrown at this young man to this day. And despite that, you have the multitude arising, the surveys arising, the percentages arising as it goes. This is not a campaign statement or a propaganda. These are simply the statement of what you see and what you hear, and as far as this multitude is concerned, what they can sense. Going back in time in order to have a future that they feel will fulfill their dreams. Going back in time to 1965, when Ferdinand Marcos was elected, going back in time to 36 years ago, and yet believing that by going back in time, whether they remember it well or not, it is that time that you have this multitude arising, and it is that time that will be able to answer their dreams 18 days from today. Well, perhaps we can discuss that even further at some other episode because I've already talked about it endlessly in other episodes. But remember this always. Ferdinand Edralin Marcos and Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos, a gap of 56 years. This young boy climbing Malacanang 56 years ago, you have a multitude arising now that would most possibly, probably, and quite definitely, as a lot of people would say, be climbing up the same steps again as the next president of our republic. Okay, so let's see what people have been saying before we close. We have, sometimes we cannot read all of the comments here. Good afternoon from Joanne Riosa. Zanea Arcilia, good afternoon. God bless you and all our viewers here. Safe, everyone. Independent 168. Hello po, Ma'am Rita Gadi, watching from Taiwan. 20 days to go, yes. Jesus bin Kabulisan, yes. You have plenty of hearts and plenty of this V signs. Shay Latosa Venturina, good afternoon po. Good afternoon then. You have the BBM Sara Uni team from the Risa Diaz Macalino Cantil. Watching Kabulisan, yes, I've already mentioned you. Watching from Vienna, Austria. In Europe, Marcos Parin, go, go, go. Uni team. Alexian Warian Bernardo, hello po Ma'am Rita. Nawa po palagi kayong okay. Yes, thank you very much. Salamat po sa inyong story. Napakahaba, tsaka napakatagal na pala. Ellen Agtawili Echore, watching. Charity Bakday, mabuhay po kayo Madam Rita. Thank you. God bless at mag-iingat po kayo palagi. Thank you very much. M, and then there's a flower E. Hello po Ma'am Rita. Na-late po ako pero shared din po naman. Smart Samarprit Donsai, shared din po Ma'am Rita. Then you have, 2022, praying for victory. I love BBM and Sara Uni Team, Provinciana Channel. Good evening, Madam Rita. Thank you very much. Maite Baisa. These are already saying good evening at this stage. Butch love, my parents love the Marcoses, so was our elders, and they kept on researching about Marcos, and you're one of my sources. Pero I also search ibang sources and I understand why they love the Marcoses. Very good. Independent buhay po ang mga magulang ko, Ma'am Rita, 1949. Dan araw-araw po nila dinidiga ang mga nakaraan kung ano po ang mabuti. Thank you very much for listening. And of course, we have Suprema Valiant, Madam Rita, my idol. Thank you very much. You have never changed. Yes, we have changed. Malapit na tayo mag-80. Saludo ako sa inyo. Panahon ni President Marcos regime, nakasubaybay na po kami sa inyo. Nako, talagang medyo matikatandaan na rin. But why, Ms. Gadi, did our think tanks and best brains at the time allow Corazon Aquino to sign executive order? Well, they drafted that signature, and they were a revolutionary government. They did it, of course. Surely someone wrote it for her. Yeah, sila, Salonga, of course, yes. We need to know. Well, we asked them. Some of them are still alive. Inam Olekram, shout out, Ma'am Rita, sama ka global elite entrepreneurs, more power, stay healthy. Thank you very much. Total infrastructure during Marcos, yes, indeed. We had a budget, and mini-mention na yung magkano yung budget natin. Oo nga, laki-laki ng ninakaw, sobra pa sa budget. 480 billion lang yung budget natin, yung ninakaw daw, mas malaki pa doon. Thank you, Ms. Gadi, for the great information about the East Marcoses. Glad to hear you again. Watching from Amman, Jordan. Assalamualaikum. You're now in the Ramadan period at this stage. We just finished our Holy Week, and of course, the great ascension and the resurrection, and forthwith the ascension of our Lord. God bless the Marcos family from Nerissa Diaz Cantil. And then we have several others from Rome, Italy. If there are any problems there, please address them immediately to the DFA, because we're receiving some news regarding ballots being shaded in Milan, for instance. Pag natuldukan ng unity ang pagbaha at landslide sa bansa, yan, of course, they're now talking about the effects of climate change, and then several others. We don't have much time anymore anyway. So thank you for all of those who have sent their messages, and thank you to all of you who have listened in. As I've said, you are part of the multitude arising, or if not, then perhaps there will be arising, the dreams that most of our people would want already realized soon enough. We close our program again with a prayer. Dear God, walk with us through the season of this pandemic and also to the season of our elections. Open our hearts to your guidance, O Lord, and give us the strength to share your love with others. Through this time of uncertainty and also of certainty, may we look at each day as a celebration of your greatness, O Lord, and make us ready to receive your mercy and your love. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. Thank you for having joined me. This is Rita Gadi, and this has been your hour. Ba-ba-da-ba-dum, ba-ba-da-ba-dum, ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-dum, bum, 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 bum.